All right. So welcome everyone to the second ReDem Quality Day of 2025. It's wonderful looking at the participant list. Wonderful to see so many of you joining us again, many familiar faces from last week and also quite a few new ones here today. It's great to have you all here. I'm Julia Mittermeier, COO at ReDem. I'm your host for the ReDem Quality Days and for this session as well. This year's overarching theme is the dirty truth about data quality and what to do about it. We kicked off the webinar series last week by exploring what research reveals about survey fraud, featuring two insightful sessions by Gar Gisani and Efrain Ribeiro. And today is all about real life lessons and hands-on fixes from the field. We have two sessions and three fantastic speakers lined up with Karine Pepin, with Brian Kirby and Florian Kögl. Both of the sessions will run around 20 minutes again, followed by a 10-minute Q&A. So please submit your questions at any time in the Q&A tab below. We'll pick them up right after each talk. So please join me today in welcoming, or join me now in welcoming our first speakers, Florian Kögl, CEO of ReDem, and Brian Kirby, Director of Sampling and Social Media Recruiting at Mindline. Brian has over 2 decades of experience in data collection. He's known for his hands-on expertise, and as he likes to say, he's the man for complex survey setups, and we know Brian for his practical approach, his can-do attitude, and above all, his dedication to data quality. So it's great to have you today, Brian.
Thank you. Great for having me. Thank you.
And we have Florian. Florian is CEO of ReDem, and as many of you know, ReDem is specializing in data cleaning and fraud detection. So Florian is our visionary and is on the front lines, also in the fight for data quality. And he serves as the president of the VMÖ, the Austria's Market Research Association, is Austria's representative for ESOMA, and is an active contributor to the Global Data Quality Initiative. And together, the two, they will explore the shifting fraud landscape, what kind of fraud often manage to slip through, even with solid systems, and which smarter techniques are needed and used today. So Brian and Florian, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Julia. Let me share my screen right now. So it's visible, right?
Yes.
So perfect. Good. Yeah. Welcome everyone. 38%, 45%, and 50%. What do all of these percentages have in common? So they represent basically the share of poor quality interviews measured worldwide in online surveys, and that's most due to fraud. But yeah, some may argue survey fraud, that's nothing new, right? But the question is now, okay, why is it suddenly such a hot topic? Why are we seeing such a rise in conference talks, articles, and also new fraud detection tools, technologies, etc.? And why is there a new initiative, the Global Data Quality Initiative, been formed to tackle this issue on a global level? The answer is survey fraud has changed, and it has changed radically. But some of you might object or might argue in my surveys it's different. In my surveys we only see let's say 20% of bad data. And our client Media One therefore wanted to find out what only 16% of bad data leads to Stiegl's brand tracking study. And Stiegl beer is one of the largest breweries in Austria and most popular breweries in Austria. And the impact here was basically eye-opening for all of us. And the results here were the following. The TV spot recognition was 26% higher. the spot comprehensibility was 28% higher, and the brand awareness was 20% lower. And they said to us, hey, we would have drawn completely different conclusions. And that's what it's all about, right? And this example shows how much impact even 16% of low data quality can have for our results. And when we look at these facts, and especially when since we have also AI on the plate here, the question is, do online surveys still have a future? And that's what we are looking at today. And today we are looking at three different parts. The first thing is what we see when it comes to survey fraud. The second part is what we need to do, what are concrete actions, and the third part is what it means to us as an industry and in general. And let's get started with what we see when it comes to survey fraud right now. And when we look at survey fraud, and survey fraud specifically for incentivized online surveys, that's, I think, very, very crucial here. We typically see two main stages. The first part, or the first stage, is the fraudsters want to come or want to get into the system by bypassing the verification parts of specifically online panels. And the second part is, once they're in, they move to the part of gaming the system. So that is where they try to complete as many surveys as possible, and also to collect as many incentives as they can. And sometimes they do it manually. Other times they build some bots and scripts, some tools to automate this fraud kind of system at scale. Let's look at the bypassing part first. So what is possible here? What do they do? And many people still believe that. At least that comes out from the discussions we have, that if we verify email addresses, phone numbers, or even voice calls, then the respondent must be real. But to be honest, that's a myth. And in reality, creating fake email addresses just takes seconds. And even SMS, voice verifications that can easily bypassed. And here is the part where it gets really serious and scary, to be honest. Let me start the video here. What you're seeing here is called face reenactment. On the left side, you see a real person moving and speaking, and on the right side, there's some photos of different people, and those are animated in real time by AI. That's, at least for me, kind of scary. And I can also tell you a personal story to this kind of thing. A couple of months ago, we almost granted a contractor access to our systems, and this guy basically was just applying as a freelance developer to us, and he used this tool, this technology, this kind of face reenactment to hide his identity. And it looked so real that even we, as an, let's say, AI first company, didn't recognize it initially that it was AI. And fortunately, we ended this collaboration just in time and nothing happened, but it was really close. And this example should just show us how fast everything is evolving and what's happening on this side. And after they are in now, they try to game the system, as we discussed. And here we see three different types of actors, let's say. The first type is professional survey takers. Those are real people pretending to be as many different people, using tools to qualify faster for the surveys and speed through it, and try, of course, to participate as many surveys as possible. The second option, or the second possibility here, are simple bots. So those are simple scripts that click their way through the questions, through the surveys. And third, and here it's where it gets kind of dangerous, those are AI-driven bots. Let's have a closer look. Here's one of the tools. That's a very interesting example. This specifically designed to help game the system or game the service. It's called AI form fill, and it's one of the many tools out there that are designed to generate answers to open-ended questions just by installing a plugin in your browser. And on their website, if you go to their website, they're not even trying to hide this kind of use case. On their website, and I have to read that, they write, AI form fill assists in survey participation by generating thoughtful responses to open-ended questions. So kind of interesting, right? So, but if you read those kind of answers, you might object, and that's what we also hear a lot. Yeah, they're perfect. They're easily you can easily spot them. They're long. They're perfect. They're well formulated, and of course that's true. But it's only true if they're not prompted in the right way. In the second example here, this is where it comes to the right prompting, let's say. We created a customized GPT, just takes a couple of minutes, and we asked the AI to respond like a 18-year-old female US citizen, to keep the answers short, specific, concise, etc. And here's the result. As you can see, the question here was, please describe a situation where you typically consume content from a social media platform, kind of. And the answer was, usually when I'm bored at night or just laying in the bed before sleep, I scroll through TikTok or Insta Reels, mostly random funny stuff or food videos, nothing too serious. And now let's be honest, if we see an answer like this in our surveys, I think nobody would think that's AI generated. At least I wouldn't be able to recognize it. And here, that's the point of this whole example. It's very hard right now to distinguish between a real answer of a real person and an AI generated one. But now it's where it gets really serious. It's the whole thing with the AI agents. It's a big topic in general in this whole AI landscape. And AI agents, as I guess most of you know, those are independent AI tools that can automatically perform tasks on the behalf of the users. And the question is, what happens if those AI agents enter our surveys? And let's peek here into the future. And as some of you might know, there's this tool called computer use from Anthropic. There's also one from OpenAI. It's just those different tools, agent tools. And in this video here, as you can see, this video was provided us from Steffen Schmidt, and here Claude is prompted to behave like a 45-year-old US citizen, and to complete the survey completely autonomously. As you can see, the agent clicks through the questionnaire and finishes it, and that's yeah, kind of problematic, I would say. It's still for real fraudsters, it's still a bit too expensive but the prices are already falling down and already at the point where they might start be able to use the system here. And yeah, it's, I think, a challenging example, and maybe a taste of where AI-driven fraud is heading. Yeah, and now I would like to hand over to Brian so that we can that he can share his observations and best practices, and yeah, what they do in their daily work with all of us.
Right, thank you, Florian. Yes, to get back to the topic of using open-ended questions for quality checks, this has always been important for us and always has been in the business, I believe. You can find your easy or your dumb cheater by straight lining, always answering same codes, or implausible answer behavior in the screener, like using every product and all this. That's like standard in our industry, and but the cheaters have also, of course, learned that don't be too fast in a questionnaire, otherwise you'll be caught. And it was always say a higher standard to use open-ended questions, because there you can find those lazy participants, those are rushing, or even bots. Next, please. The use of them always gives you a little more depth in terms of just to understand, is this person or is this instance even answering in the right language, or actually has the person or whoever it is read the question or not. And those things have always been like an add-on quality check measure that has worked quite well. And next, please. What is still valid, and just because we have this new issue with the AI, those checks still do work, and always important when asking open-ended questions, ask them widely to encourage the participant, the panelists, to explain themselves. So I said, why is better than which? I'll say, which is your favorite colors? You will only get a one-word answer. And so try to explore more there, and that still does apply. Right, and if possible, still it's of course always useful to use as many open-ended questions as you can, just to have more data, to be able to compare the answers to each other, to get even a broader view of what's happening there. Some of those might then be the same answers, or you can maybe get a pattern out of those. And yeah, the more data you have, the higher level of precision of your quality checks you'll get. Yeah. And so what the drawbacks always have been, it's time costly. If you have, say, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 cases, maybe in 5 languages, and then you have 5 open-ended questions for each complete interview, then of course it can take hours and hours, and also the translation work, which now of course is much easier than it has been in the past. But of course, it's always a question of, say, deciding how much work am I going to put into this, and that's where it's like a high-end sophisticated technique comes in. So next slide, and then yeah, and you can go to the next one. And so what we do is we have been working with ReDem for 2 years now, and that has helped us a lot to say automate those kind of processes, to actually be able to ask the participants not maybe 1 or 2, but maybe 5 open-ended questions, and have these in all languages, have these scanned through the AI, and also to spot duplicates or similar answers in open-ended questions. It works very well. It still really works well to catch inattentive respondents, those are just not reading the questions and maybe watching TV and just answering anything on the smartphone. Also the pros, you can also spot patterns looking at the open-ended questions, because those might also be similar, and they might always have the same answer for a specific question, and also catch the click farms and bots. that that's the target. So, and then is this good enough? So what we are doing now, is that good enough? Or what we have been doing? Partly. Those who are, say, inattentive, unwanted activity, those simple bots, as Florian showed, they're quite easy to spot because they'll probably always do the same thing like an algorithm on a question. And also those lazy respondents, you can get those quite easily if you have good data checks. That's not that hard. But this is where next level comes in, and that's also me coming from say from the practical side, collecting the data, and us as Institute using the data for analysis. Things are developing quite quickly, and I have seen different developments in this direction that we are actually encountering not algorithms, like they would always do the same thing in the same situation technically, but actually much more developed now. So we need new means to encounter and to protect ourselves from that. So the question is, how much of this, what Florian has just shown us, how much is already in the data? And we don't know, because of course we would catch those we can catch, and the other ones we wouldn't even know. So they might seem like normal panelists, and we might trust the panels. Okay, they keep their place clean by making registration hard enough to bypass. But still, we still see this happens. So I will show you then some examples of very. This is like a bot or click farm, and that was one of our like an energy sector survey. And as you can see, okay, well, you have this block of participations, and whatever it was always answers the same, because it was told to do so, it was programmed to do so. It's always the same. Well, you can spot those quite easily. Of course, you have to ask open-ended questions in the first place, but those are like simple bots, easy to catch if you actually take a look. So, and then the next is one thing that that's also we found. This was a body care survey in April 25, and we found this actually also with help of ReDem's tool, that you see here. It's basically the same answer to a certain question. And you will see there are those words that I highlighted and colored there. That's what I did that. You can see, okay, it kept all the wording, but changed the sentences not to be exactly the same. So this is like one next step to that an AI would then alter the sentences just to avoid being duplicating, because of course you'll be caught more easily. So, and then what I did, and that was not real data, but I'm sure that's happening too, as Florian just showed us. I just took this one of these statements and prompted this into ChatGPT and said, okay, make this sentence have the same meaning, but you can skip certain keywords. You can just make it generally sound the same. So the core meaning should be preserved. And this is what it did. And then all of a sudden, this is now you don't really have any more. You lose your ability to track these down as duplicates. And if then also the AI is prompted to be colloquial and keep it short, we will have no more possibility for even a very sophisticated AI technique to find these. So the level of sophistication by the fraudsters has to be, in our opinion, met by another say level of checking things. Yeah, and then I'm handing it back to Florian.
Thanks, Brian. So the question is now if the question is basically what we need to do as an industry. So we talked a lot right now about what are the risks, what are the challenges, what we see in the data, and also which risks AI brings onto the table. But what about the what about the flip side? And let's say like many technologies, AI is kind of neutral. So we decide, is it kind of a weapon or a cure? And AI can, in this case, can also be a shield for data quality. And I think that becomes more clear if we see this kind of examples. Manual check alone won't keep up. So it's always harder to distinguish between real answers and artificially created ones. So we must deploy our AI ourselves. Otherwise, it's kind of if we're entering a motorboat race with a robot, and I think that's not smart. And the question is now, what can we do now? And as Brian has already mentioned, the open-ended questions itself are still a very, very good data point to detect bad data. And in this case, AI can help us analyzing the open-ended responses, and being a very good use case here. The AI can read, evaluate, categorize the responses much faster than we can as a human. And it can, for example, automatically flag off-topic answers, gibberish answers, nonsense answers. And it's very good for detecting duplicates, kind of similarities, those kind of things. And one other big strength of AI is it's good in detecting patterns that humans can't see. For example, AI generated responses. So where AI helps us to detect AI, where we as humans, and we have seen that in this social media example earlier, it's hard for us to tell the difference, but the AI can do that. And so it looks at the sentence structure, semantics, and also linguistic patterns. So to summarize, the first good use case, or what we can basically do, is checking the open ends, and that can be done in a more sophisticated way. So use case number one, checking open ends. Secondly, is checking the typing behavior. So now the first example I showed you was checking the output. Now it's the other way, checking the input. Basically, with the typing behavior analysis, we can analyze the keystroke patterns, the timing between the keystrokes, also copy paste behavior, and other kind of behavioral signals, which allow us to detect whether response was typed naturally by human or generated by a bot or an AI tool. And in order to explore this, we have also built a behavioral analytics playground. So if you want to try it out, you can scan the QR code and see how such a tool can basically work. So second use case is input behavior, basically. And now AI use case number 3 goes beyond the analysis of an individual data point or individual questions. It extends the analysis to the entire interview. Where AI is really good at is it can automatically detect contradictions in respondents' answers. And in low quality, that's at least what we have seen in the data. In low quality data, whether it's from inattentive respondents, professional survey takers, or bots, we see again and again inconsistency. And this is like, just to give a quick example, someone is saying, for example, Spotify is my favorite podcast platform, but later on, not recognizing this brand anywhere else. So the people, they don't read, and they just click through the survey. But spotting this kind of answers, it's kind of tough for humans, especially if the question is long, if there are many options. The only thing you can do as a human is implementing just a couple of logic checks, right? But the AI is really good to look at it from a holistic perspective and to get the big picture. So this is where AI gives us definitely a clear advantage. And let me share two real observations that we have seen how powerful, where you can see basically how powerful AI can be in identifying unlikely contradictory answers. The one example was a mobility survey where a respondent or a bot wrote that they love driving model XYZ, of a specific car model. And the AI flagged this response as it found out that the car mentioned had only been announced online. In other words, this person claimed to drive a car that didn't even exist on the roads. So, but to recognize a contradiction like this requires a very specific context knowledge. And the other case, someone said they're taking the subway several times a day by itself. And this answer makes sense, right? But then the AI looked at their state at home and location and found out that both are in an area where there's no subway, no subway within 200 kilometers. So it's not that it's technically impossible, but it's very unlikely. So the AI made the connection between the geographic data and some behavioral claims. And that's also something that's very hard as a human to recognize something like this. So to summarize it's not just about logic anymore. It's about real world knowledge. And Brian will now tell us what else we can do here.
Yeah, this is one chart. I'll spare you of going through all of the single items around the circle in the middle, but we have decided, or we have been going into three general directions. And one of course is the top right corner, which is answer behavior, which we've been talking about, including checking the open-ended question, straight line invariance, speeding, are you too quick or too slow, or in blocks, or in, and those are like standards in the industry, and still they should not be forgotten, because we still find loads of people via these general checks. We always do this, and then also, of course, being in very close contact with the online panels. That's for us is very important, and also our selection of suppliers also really depends on how good are they reacting towards us feedbacking what went wrong with the data. What is something that we have learned when we looked at the bots that we found over time by all kinds of different measures, is that there are things to find in the metadata, like the operating systems, browser languages, the browser types and browser versions, mouse and touch movement, just as Florian has shown us. We have a similar thing, not as sophisticated as ReDem is offering, but also access times. Is this at nighttime at the a designated country you're asking people, or is it daytime? And do you have like blocks of people coming at the same time? And of course, technical bot traps like honeypots and copy paste detection. Is this natural text actually typed or not? And also plausibility checks on the geolocation, meaning say you probably need a VPN for your bot for it not to be spotted to be somewhere else. But of course, VPNs are normally not set in smaller villages, and you can find certain connections between dots if you have a look at it, but it's still quite a widespread field. But we have been digging into this quite some in the near past, because we have also seen that we need just one more view onto the whole thing to get this like in a 360 degrees perspective, to not only go for answer behavior, because we might be tricked, even using the most sophisticated techniques. There might be necessary to go on another level to to look at technical data too. Yeah, that's our goal, and that's what we're working on.
All right. Yeah, and one last observation I'd like to share with you is to how crucial it is to keep involving the checks and to keep the checks up to date. In the mid-year of 2024, we noticed a very unusual trend. So the share of poor quality data was falling, as you can see here in this chart. And we tried to understand why this was the case. So we ask ourselves, hey, has fraud really gone down, or has it simply become more sophisticated? And interestingly, in the end of Q3 2024, we rolled out several improvements and extensions of our quality checks, and immediately the proportion of bad data, went up again. And this example shows that fraud hasn't actually decreased; it just became more sophisticated. And therefore, I think what became very clear to us, we must keep refining our quality checks continuously. And since then, it always has become our primary focus. And in other words, the quality check that worked today may no longer work tomorrow. And summing up that whole thing here, what does it mean for us as an insights industry? And there are 6 things to take away from this from this talk here. Let's start with the risks. So there are technical advancements for fraudsters, especially with AI, and so it is becoming increasingly challenging that to detect fraudsters, and server fraud is on the rise. Also, server fraud is involving, and AI now allows the bad actors to bypass many of the traditional checks, as we have seen. And thirdly, the answers of AI generated tools are hard to detect, and it's hard to distinguish between humans and artificially created ones. But there are also, at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities. First, we are now able to process this open-ended checks, for example, much faster. The data checking and cleaning part that has taken hours previously is now can just happen in seconds. And also the AI is able to pick up on inconsistencies that would otherwise fly under the radar. And third, AI help us to go beyond the kind of rule-based checks, and it understands the behavior. So AI will definitely change the quality and quality assurance of server research, but it's definitely on us how it does it. And now let's come back to the question from the very beginning: do online surveys have a future? And my answer would be absolutely. There is a future, but we need the right technologies, the right tools, and also the right partners to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Florian, for sharing your insights with us. I think that was very interesting to listen to. We have questions with regards to the methods to detect AI-powered bots effectively, and I think you came to that part already, Florian, afterwards, and also Brian, you talked about the different solutions. And having an eye on the time, I'd say let's move on to Karine Pepin. So we have enough time for Karine Pepin's session as well. So Karine is a Quarks Award winner and has over 25 years of hands-on research experience. She's now co-founder of the Research Heads, a San Francisco-based agency. Karine's LinkedIn tagline says it all: nobody loves service as much as I do, and honestly, we believe her. If you're wondering who's always the first to like, to comment, or to share the latest data quality posts and research articles with the Insights community, it's always Karine. And she's also a key member of Case for Quality. She's one of the most committed and active champions for data quality that we know. And we are very excited to have you here today, Karine, with us to share your real world lessons and learnings with us. Karine, over to you.
Thank you, Julia, for the introduction. So as you just said, I've been deep in the topic of data quality since 2016 now, and I've always been super hands-on with my project. I started out checking whole counts. If you're old enough to know what this means, you know. And so you can imagine I've seen my fair share of challenging projects. And today I wanted to walk you through one of those studies that was really challenging, where there was a lot of fraud, and talk about how we approach the problem, what worked, what didn't work, and what the data would have looked like before with the fraud and without the fraud. And then we can talk about some of the next steps for researchers. So first, a couple of disclaimers before we get into it. To maintain the confidentiality of everyone involved here, I will not be disclosing the names of any fraud detection tools or sample sources. The data shown represents a random subset of the full data set. It is not the final results. All attributes have been renamed using generic labels. And most importantly, it was not set up as a scientific experiment. This is just me taking you through real life. So let's get started and talk about all of the different layers of protection that comes into play with data quality. So going back to 2022, I wrote an article in Green Book called Applying the Swiss Cheese Model to Survey Fraud. And that article has aged really well. So the inspiration for that was an article in the New York Times in 2020 about the different layers of protection that we can apply to protect ourselves against COVID-19. So in our case, we're not talking about, obviously, masks or social distancing or vaccines, but the same idea of that Swiss cheese model can apply to market research, because we have the best chance of preventing poor data quality if we apply all the layers together. So for us, this starts with a fraud detection software, with writing smart screeners, good questionnaire, and then doing a review of the data that we collected after fieldwork. So this, as I mentioned, this has aged really well because the layers are more important than ever. And this is the project I want to talk about. And this is how it all started. So we knew going into this was going to be a difficult study. So we came in prepared. We started out with a fraud detection software that we'll call Tool A, pre-survey. And in survey, we also had a couple of things going here. We had Tool A, which also offer an open-end assessment real time. We had a regular survey check, and we had our manual post data collection checks of kind of getting a general sense of the data in aggregate and reviewing the open ends. So this is our typical stack, I guess, data quality stack. But for this one, because we knew this was going to be hard, we thought, let's add a second fraud detection software in the survey. So we start field work, we start reviewing the data, we do our daily manual checks, and we're like, okay, this is not going well. There is a lot going on here. So this is when we brought on Tool C and Tool D to help us assess the quality of the data, but on the back end now of the data we had already collected. And we did this for two reasons. One is we needed something to help us speed up here. There was a lot of data to go through. And the second reason is we were trying to take the subjectivity out of this process, because as a researcher, you really don't want to be sitting there and being the one that makes the judgment call whether somebody is good or somebody is bad. So we wanted an objective sort of third-party tool that can help us with that. So this was all great, but we still hadn't fixed the root cause of the problem here, which is stopping the fraud before it gets in, because once it's in, it just tends to blend and it's very difficult to identify. So we brought on Tool E. So Tool E is another fraud detection software that we use pre-survey. And then we also included here in the survey Tool C, which not only can do an assessment of the data after it's collected, but it can also do it real time in the survey. So by this point, we have 5 fraud detection software going, we have an in-survey quality checks, and we have our manual review. So what we found out is once you start layering all these tools, it's a little bit like trying to predict the weather. So this is the weather forecast for Honolulu. And what you can see here is between the Apple Weather app, the Weather Channel, and Google, they only agree on 3 out of the 8 days, and nobody agrees on the temperature. So every app gives you a different forecast. And it's kind of where we were at here with all of our different checks in this survey. So let's look at each of the line of defense that we had into a little bit more detail. So first, pre-survey, as I mentioned, we had tool A. Tool A was more focused on digital fingerprinting. This was provided by our sample providers. So that is very simple setup that we always have. And tool A blocks the respondents or the fraudsters before they get into the survey. So in general, of all the survey entrants that goes through tool A, it flags 20 to 40% of them. So I don't know specifically for this one, but let's assume it's the same range. Then we had tool E. So tool E works slightly differently in that it is a behavioral pre-screener primarily. It does have some measure of some passive, measure of fraud, but the main differentiator of tool E is really that behavioral pre-screener where people are asked questions. So the way that we had this set up was that people went through tool A. If they were vetted by tool A, instead of being redirected to our survey, they were redirected to tool E. And if they passed all of the questions, then they were allowed into our survey. So with tool A, we blocked 30 to 65% of respondents with tool E, we blocked 30 to 65% of respondents after tool A. So you might be thinking, this is great, we're stopping all this fraud, amazing. Well, not so fast. What happens is, if the panels can't make money from your survey, they will stop sending people to it. So this is what happened here. Traffic slowed down considerably, and then we had to make that trade-off. So we basically had to sort of decrease our security settings. The second line of defense is in survey. So we had tool A, B, C there going. Tool A and C work similarly. It's an open-end assessment in real time in the survey. This is all integrated in the survey via an API. And both tools term respondents who fail the assessment immediately via a quality check or quality control redirect in the survey. So of the qualified participant, they flag tool A 3%, tool C 5%. Some overlap, but also many differences. Tool B is sort of like an all-in-one. So it works in the survey also via an API, but it checks all 3 digital fingerprinting, behavioral monitoring, sort of like mouse movement, and an open-end assessment in real time. So with tool E, we did not term people directly in the survey. We flagged them and we had to reconcile in the backend. So APIs are making integration of fraud detection software really easy in the survey. The only thing is that it can get tricky, I think, if you're not working with a programmer. So in our case, it was fine. We got all this working, but I imagine if you're working with a DIY platform, you don't have access to the code or you can't modify the code, then this is difficult for you. So with tool B, we flagged 23% of respondents. And then finally, we had our regular quality control checks, always scripted in the survey, always screen out via a quality control redirect, so they never make it into our data set. And here we flagged 13% of the respondents. Now our last third line of defense, post-survey. So tool C and D provided an AI-assisted open-end review of the survey. We also had one tool that conducted a review of the quantitative data. So this is not real time, so we had to reconcile on the back end. And of the participants, the tool reviewed together, both of them, we flagged between 35 and 75% of the participants that were reviewed. And this is the downside with AI. it has no mercy. It will flag everyone for low effort and being off topic if you let it. So, you know, sometimes, usually these tools come with a sort of threshold that you can set yourself. So it's really important, at least at the beginning, that you review how it's assessing the data, and that you kind of set, you know, decide for yourself what that threshold should be. And then finally, we had our manual review of the data. Here we looked for general patterns and for the open ends. And we still found a lot of issues that all of these tools had completely missed. But I have to say, this is not typical. Okay, if you do everything right, by the time you usually get here, you should really not be removing more than 5% of the completes. But here we found clusters of IP addresses that were identical with identical responses. We found a cluster of Linux operating system desktop users, which in a normal study, you just have a handful of those people, and so much more. So now you're probably thinking, first, I'm a crazy person, maybe, but also, how many people did we end up blocking or removing at the end of all this? And I'm not going to say, because it's kind of an embarrassing number, but also this is only going to distract from what the real takeaways are here, is that first, we did not remove everyone that the tools had flagged. We sort of had a hierarchy here. And for me personally, I'm comfortable with all the issues that we identify in real time, like the digital fingerprinting, passive, you know, behavioral monitoring, that sort of thing I have a lot of confidence in. When it comes to reviewing the data after it's collected and we don't have that real-time information, I tend to put less weight on that. And that includes our traditional QC checks, which we'll get into soon. The other thing I think that's important to remember is that there are more and more fraud detection software on the market. So a few years ago, you had 4, 5 of them. Now I counted 18. And that's great. Like, I'm a huge advocate for this. I think at this point in the history of market research, we need to use at least 2. If you have one that can do everything, awesome. But I think we're showing here that they catch different problems. So having 2 is a good idea. But what is going to happen with this is that the more lights we shine, the more problems we're going to find. And this is not sustainable for the industry because we are simply going to run out of respondents. And the only way to change this trajectory is if we start verifying people's identity. Because if we know that the people we're talking to are who they say they are, then we are not going to be, we don't need, at least for me, to be super crazy about all the checks. You know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt if I know that they are real people. So now looking at the traditional quality checks that we had in the survey, it is very clear that fraudsters easily bypassed all of them. So in our screener, we had your typical fake products, fake brands. We had a check for selecting too many products. We caught nobody here, basically. In the survey, we had straight liner checks. We had 2 of them. We had a speeder checks. Again, very few fraudsters fail those checks. The only thing that worked a little bit better, and it's that, you know, it's checking if people are kind of really reading the questions by asking, select this row, like select somewhat agree for this. So in this case, the first checks caught 14% of people and the second check, 10%. But really what this means is that 85 to 90% of the fraudsters would not have been flagged in the survey itself by the traditional checks that we have. So traditional quality checks, I think, are still important. You know, I still put them in there, but this is really getting more at unengaged and inattentive respondents. It's not really going to help you with fraud. So the last section here is about really kind of my biggest pet peeve. It's this argument that there is such thing as good enough data. I think the problem with this is that good enough data implies that we are able to identify fraud and to make an informed decision about how much fraud we let in the study. But those two things are actually not true. We can't necessarily identify fraud. And if we could, then why would we even want a percentage of it in the study? So let's look at how the fraud would have impacted the data in the case of this study. And starting with the incidence rate, okay, the fraudster incidence rate was 92% because they know how to game the system, they know how to qualify, and the real participants was 13%. So I hope nobody's using their screen out data for sizing if you don't have a fraud detection software, because the difference here is pretty crazy. If we start looking into the survey, so the total column here, just to give some background, has 30% fraud in it. And I've played with that. I could have made this 30, more or less. I picked 30% because you generally see people say that 30 to 40% of the data is bad if you don't do anything about it. And it is also in line with what Case for Quality found in their 2022 study. So they conducted the study and they basically concluded that between duplicates, inattentive respondents, and fraud, it added up to about 40%. So here I was good with that 30% fraud. So it combines fraudsters and real participants. This is a question about ownership. We just simply ask respondents if they own these products. And if you just kind of look at this at first glance, you don't know what the products are, so you just have to trust me, but it looks okay overall. The problem comes when you start looking at the difference between the real participants and the fraudster. So for that first product, 98% of real participants said they own it. Only 66% of the fraudsters own it. So that's a 32 percentage point difference. Second product is a 57 percentage point different. And then if you look at the a low incidence product, then you've got the opposite. There's only 3% of the market owning this, but it's 27% of the fraudsters. So if you don't have any benchmark and you just look at the total, you might think, well, it looks okay, but it doesn't, because you're inflating the low IR products, and you sort of the high IR products, like the one that is 98% of real participants, is actually lower in reality. And you can't just fix that because you don't know how fraud is going to skew your results. Now, if we look at purchase, so this is a top two box. This combines very influential and extremely influential, or something like that. And what happens is that fraud tends to hide the extreme. So fraudsters are not going out of their way to select like very likely and like I hate this thing. So they're kind of more like 3, 4 on a scale. And so what happens is, if you look at our top two box for each attributes for fraudsters, the range is very narrow. It's only between 54% and 60%. And for the real participants, it's between 44% and 81%. So it's sort of like flatten your total. And depending how much fraud you have in it, it might flatten it to the point where there's like nothing to say about this data. It's not like it looks weird. It's just there's literally nothing to say because all the attributes are kind of the same. And the last point I want to make about this is actually the most important point. And I think people are not talking about this enough because we're just so focused on like 1% at a time. But the problem is the percentage is not the insight. The insight is actually the relationship between the variables, is being able to explain that. This is what an insight is. And with fraudulent data, your data is going to be much less coherent because people don't really read. So it adds a lot of noise. And at the end of the day, it makes the job of the researchers much harder. So for this, I just ran a simple Pearson correlation between 2 questions. One was, how likely are you to purchase this given brand? So this was the given brand there. And then how would these factors influence your decision? So we've got all these attributes. You can clearly see here, there's 6 of them that are positive relationship and they're significant. So what this means is that people who are influenced by these attributes or these factors are more likely to purchase this given brand. We also have a lot of other attributes that are positive but not significant, and then you have one that's actually negative. But let's look at the fraudsters. This is completely messed up, okay? There's nothing significant. There's a lot of negative relationships in here. There's like nothing to say about this data. It just looks weird. And then look at the real participants. So we have two more attributes that are significant. With the strength of the coefficient is actually higher, and there is nothing that's negative. And you would see if you had the real data that it's even more obvious, because when I selected that random subset of the data, I decreased the sample size. With the higher sample size, this makes even more sense. So it's one thing when the bad data is kind of random, and I guess it might be, but we can never predict how random bad data is. So if all the fraudsters decide that they're making $200,000 a year, well, then you don't just have bad data. You actually are, you have bad data, but it's not just adding the noise. It's kind of like creating a bias and taking your whole analysis in a different direction. So what can we do as researchers? Well, I heard this expression recently from someone who spent a number of years in the military, and I thought it was so good because that is exactly what we need to do. We have to inspect what we expect. So I'm often asked, where do I get my sample? You know, as if there's like this magic place where we hide all the good sample and only a few people know where that is. And I'm here to say there might be, but I think chasing the perfect sample source is not the right solution because of this kind of systematic lack of transparency that we have created in the industry. We can never really rely on sample providers to do what they say and say what they do. So until we start validating people's identity, the future is curation. So you have to take ownership of the data quality process as a researcher and use your own tools and ask for proof. At the moment, that is kind of the only way. So that's it for me. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out directly, you can reach me on LinkedIn. And if you are a client-side researcher, you can reach out directly to Case for Quality at info@caseforquality.com. Somebody's going to pick up that email and respond to you as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Karine. Wow, those are incredible and also shocking results, I have to admit. I think it clearly shows that fraudsters are becoming more sophisticated. Many of the tools that you used, right, they couldn't catch all the bad data that was in the data set, and it needed some kind of also human oversight or human involvement by a human reviewer. And more importantly, a very important message and learning that bad data doesn't introduce or create noise, but it creates a bias and it skews results. I think that became very clear from your example and from your analysis. And another third very important message, we cannot rely on sample providers alone, but have to take ownership as market researchers of the quality assurance process. We are slightly over time, but since I know that many of the registrants, they will actually watch the recording of this video, so I'd suggest if you still have time, Karine, for one or two questions to still stay in this call. So there was, perfect. There was one question, so basically based on your experience also with this project, what do you believe works best to catch fraud? I think you also mentioned in survey checks. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what that would involve.
Yeah, so I think in my experience, you need more than one tool because at this point, not every tool covers all the problems that can happen. So the most important thing is to have something, I think nowadays, in the survey, because even if fraudsters make it through the first fraud detection software, which might be more focused on, you know, blacklisted IP address and digital fingerprinting, they will have some behavior that is not normal in the survey. And so I think that's where the future is going, is this API integration and monitoring the, you know, mouse click. What else do they do? Like cut and paste, of course. the active and passive times on not just pages, but on attributes themselves. I think that's really where this is going to go. And the more tools that can do that, really the better. And the easier they are to integrate with APIs as well.
That's of course an important part of it, right? To use it properly and that it's not taking months to implement. Did you ever think about creating your own quality checks or building your own in-house tool to do that?
I would drive myself insane. I don't know if I can do this, but not really, because I'm not a tech person. I could see myself being a sort of product manager in this situation where I can tell you what to do and what is going to work, because I think one of the most important thing that, one of the biggest problem in our industry is it's all fragmented. Nobody really has the full stack. So the fraud detection people don't know what good data looks like. And, the researchers don't understand all of the technical issues and like fraud that can happen, so don't look for the right things. But I think that would be like having people that actually have experience with the data helps developing these fraud detection tool has a lot of would have a lot of good things for the industry.
So that's another important learning, like collaboration and sharing ideas, sharing learnings, and collaborating on developing effective quality checks.
Yeah. So many times I work really closely with with people in general and along in operations and everything, and I go back and I'm like, look, this doesn't look right, and then usually they say, well, everything looks fine. I'm like, but it's not fine, so let's check again, like let's find the reason why this is not right.
Exactly. And when you mentioned all these different tools, and you also mentioned that it's important to have at least two different tools in place and installed, how would you go about deciding which is the right tool for me to use?
Well, it's just a lot of trial and error, isn't it? I don't. So I think what's important is looking at what the tools does. You need digital fingerprinting, behavioral monitoring, and this open-end review. So the tricky thing is it kind of gets really technical, and as researchers, we don't always understand all of the technical details of this. But I think at a high level, you need those three things, and you need to be able to catch people in real time. So I mean, that's kind of like your main criteria here. Now, who does it best? How much does it cost? Like, then it just becomes a sort of, try it, see if that works for you, because also something that works for me might not work for somebody else. I know everybody is a little bit different, and it is one of the problem also with data quality is that it is kind of subjective in nature, and everybody has a different threshold for what it should be. And depending on who you are in that supply chain, you can have very different threshold, right? Like the sample provider might want to take a chance, they don't want to block traffic. They're like, yeah, this person looks a little fishy, but maybe not. Let's just let them in. And then the researcher is a lot more strict, I guess, because we show up in front of our clients and we are in those meetings and we have to defend every single data point. And so it's a much different context.
I agree. So a takeaway is to look for a tool that does open ends and behavioral analytics, these kind of things, and digital fingerprinting. Those are the three areas, and then play around, try it out, how effective those are in detecting fraud.
And real time, pre-survey, in-survey.
Pre-survey, in-survey, and in real time. To summarize it. And maybe one last question, or maybe we have one more. What are the reasons buyers prioritize cost or speed over data quality? Or a classic question.
Sorry, what's the question?
What are the reasons buyers still prioritize cost or speed over data quality? That's a big one. I think we could all have a whole webinar around this. This question.
I don't know. I don't. I don't prioritize speed over quality. I hope I'm not slow, but if I have to choose, it's always going to be quality first. But the speed of business, all of these decisions that need to be made yesterday, I get it. But I think you've seen in the data the giant difference that fraud actually makes. And just personally, I don't think it's worth it. If you're going for speed and you end up with a 92% incidence and market sizing, like how good is that?
Maybe I can add one sentence to that. I think that's an industry-wide a problem that we have, because say if all of the panel providers would say kick out 50% of their supply because they might be fishy, on the other hand, they would have to invest much more money to get in new panelists. They had to double up incentives to get more people into doing surveys, and that would drive the costs, the CPI for each interview, vastly up. Each one supplier doing this, they would go out of the business because everybody's offering cheaper supply, and everybody's saying, okay, well, we have a good data, we have checked this and that. So it's all like it's at a certain level, because the whole industry is under, say, also cost efficiency pressure. So if you go around and say, okay, well, you have to pay twice the price for your field work, and then a client, an industry client, would then, of course, they wouldn't celebrate this, and they would think about, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else to buy my sample, because they're all doing good stuff, and it's good enough, as we had here before. It's okay, and we can use the data, and so it's like a general thing. It's well, good quality online sample. Well, this is a question I'm putting into space. Should it not cost much more to give also leverage to actually digging much deeper into, say, identity checks, to really confirming, is this a real person? And is this going to cost more? Yes, it will. But that's going to be the way, because eventually AI and fraud will maybe take the advantage. And so it's not that, when I haven't gone that far yet, but well, those things I think that have to be thought about.
It's a good point, Brian. And since both of you, Brian and Karine, you also work with panels who buy data, right, from online access panels. And I know that many of our participants here today and registrants, they're also buyers of data or brands. What would you say, what are the aspects, or what do you look for when choosing a sample provider?
I've been working with the same panel or sample provider for probably 8 years now. And I would say it's trust. And, you have to find someone you trust. And until you can do that, and even if you do, like I said at the end, use your own fraud detection software, so it's really not so much about the source, but I think basically when choosing a sample provider nowadays, it's what do they really do on their end to clean up the traffic, basically, because this is what we're down to here, is cleaning the traffic. It's curating the flow of people that every sample provider has access to, right? And then obviously you want to work with someone who has, who verifies their participant and this and that, but there's so much noise out there. Everybody says they have access to, 32 million verified people profiled on 600 data point. Like, it's really hard, unless you're like deep into this, to know what is right and who's being honest about it. So that's why I say, yes, ideally you work with someone that you trust and that's not going to lie to you. But if you don't have that relationship, then the best you can do for yourself is to take over the curation process. Start out from the fact that everybody or most people will have access to the same exact respondents, unless it's a panel that's not on the exchange, for example. There's a handful of them. You could go to a mobile panel, for example, because they tend to have like more of a closed system. So there's going to be less fraud, and you can also monitor people more when they are on a mobile phone. But yeah, there's no real bulletproof answer to this.
Brian, do you have anything to add to this, or do you want to add anything from your side?
Just short. Yes, it's important trust, experience then with the suppliers, and what is also very important for us is, okay, how do they handle when trouble comes up? If we see problems in the data, and how is a crisis handled? And of course, at the same time, I get the job done because of time pressure, and you have to just perform and get the traffic in. But this being, say, the performance side, but trusting that they will do all they can to prevent these registrations that shouldn't be there in their panel, and we'll do the rest in checking our data, and also having this pre-survey tools running and so on. So it's like a collaboration, and that's what I said in my when I explained my round chart, that the communication and the collaboration together with our panel suppliers, which also we have 2 or 3 big ones we have been working with for ages. This has to work, and that's how trust is built in my point of view. Yeah, that's really all there's to say. And if you read panel books, all those numbers, and I throw away any panel book that I get. It's like, okay, well, it's just kind of nice to know which markets are you strong in, and the rest I'll just try it out, and then let's wait and see how it goes for like new suppliers coming in.
And I would add one thing. I think you actually want sample providers that are going to push back on you. If they say yes to everything, it's like I hear so many stories, like somebody asking for Fortune 500 CEOs and the panel company saying they can get 2,000 of them, like when there aren't even 2,000 of them to get, like crazy story. I swear, when you're like deep into this, the things you hear. But I think, yeah, like if you want someone who's going to push back on you, because if it's something that's not realistic and they end up using a leading pre-screener to get the people, well, this is going to turn into a fraud magnet, that study, right? You just want people to be honest and say, yeah, we can't do it.
So summing up, it would be a trusted partnership, a good relationship between buyers and suppliers. There are many panel providers who also do a lot in terms of data quality, with all those pre-survey checks also in place that you've mentioned, and also taking responsibility and taking ownership, and making sure you check the data quality as well. So and I think that brings us to the end of today's session, and I'd like to thank you all for being here, and a special thanks to our fantastic speakers today, Karine, Brian, and Florian, and for sharing your insights, your lessons, your solutions around survey fraud and data quality with us. We'll be back next week on June 24th for the 3rd and final quality day, where we'll tackle the big question: can the industry keep up? So Deborah Harding, Managing Director of the Market Research Society, the MRS, will share key findings from the Global Data Quality Initiative, along with some hands-on guidance from the MRS for tackling quality challenges. And we'll also host a 1-hour panel discussion with Oscar Carlson, Deborah Harding, Schiffer Cook, Hartmut Scheffler, and Florian to discuss one of the toughest topics in our field, which is AI in market research. Blessing, curse, or wake-up call? Is AI solving our toughest problems or creating even tougher ones? So we'll talk about innovation, outdated systems, and the future skills that we will also need to thrive in the insights industry. So we'd love to see you there again. Thanks for joining, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.